Hi, this is Kevin Trainer. Welcome to my first tutorial associated with Chapter 2 of the Zelle 3rd edition textbook. And in this tutorial, we're going to be building a simple program because the whole chapter is about simple programs. And as you can see here on my screen, we're going to be building a program called madlibmachine.py, and it's a sentence building program based upon Madlibs. Madlibs were fun when I was a kid, and for those of you who have never worked with Madlibs, they're typically they would come in a notebook form, and you would fill in the blanks. So you would ask a person who couldn't see the form, you'd ask them for a proper noun, a verb, an adjective, an adverb. I guess it was good for learning parts of speech. And there were blank lines, and as you were filling it out, you were making up a sentence. And usually they would be funny when you got done. If both of the participating people were involved, they'd be fun. Okay, so the skill that we're trying to do is we're trying to get easy string input, right? 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 strings. Okay, we're going to hold them in variables. Okay, just regular old string variable values. Okay, and then we're going to paste them together on output, right? And and we're going to be thinking about the program in terms of a template or pattern that we heard about in the chapter called input process output. So whenever you're doing something that's new, I think it's always good to start out with some pseudocode. Okay? And we taught you how to do pseudocode within the chapter. And let me paste in my pseudocode. So here's my pseudocode. Okay, so if you have a real simple program, it's pretty easy to put it into that input process output model. So my pseudocode for the program is 1, get input. So we're gonna prompt the user and get the character strings that we want. And as a helper here, I said note that there is no processing. Okay, so since we're just going to be gluing the strings together to create output, there's no processing per se. We're going to do all the work when we create the output. Okay? And then my last part is create output. Now, I just want to point out that what somebody could do here is they could say, well, Kevin, the processing is really to assemble the strings into a one-line output, and then create output is just to process the output. And I could say, yeah, that would be true if we didn't want to practice using the print command in a way that allows us to glue things together. So I'm going to leave it like it is. So how can I turn my pseudocode into real code? Well, this is how I would do it. Okay. First of all, I would create the main method, which we've learned about already, and already for code to get into it. And if you want to get rid of the squiggly problem here, it's saying I don't have any code. What we can do is there's an instruction called pass that will that essentially says don't do anything. Okay, and so if you put it there, the compiler will become happy that you've got code in main, but it doesn't really do anything. Okay, It's a way to calm down. And when I say compiler, I apologize. It's really the interpreter that we use in Python, and this is a smart editor that uses the interpreter in order to help it analyze the syntax of the code that we're typing in. And then, of course, we usually have a one-line invocation, main, and then that's it. Okay, so that's it. So then we're going to put our code into main. So what I usually do is this. If I'm working from pseudocode, which I do really every time that I'm doing something really new that I need to really pace myself out with. Okay, I mean, there are times when the programs just come to me, and if I feel confident in that, I'm probably not going to start with pseudocode. But a lot of you are new programmers, so this is a great place to try out your pseudocode. Okay, and so what we're going to do is we're going to put these here. Okay, and they didn't really come in the way I wanted them, so I'm going to back up. They're not indented, and everything here, including the comments, should probably be indented. Okay, so now they look like appropriate pseudocode, and it doesn't seem to like us starting with a comment with no real code, but we'll not worry about that. So we're going to get input, a couple lines of input. And then we're going to note that there is no processing. Okay, well, we don't need any lines for that because there is no code. And then we're going to create output. Got a couple lines for that. Okay. Okay, so how would we get input? Well, here's what I'm going to do. I'm not going to have you watch me do all my typing. So I've got a pre-baked version. I'm copying in lines from it. Okay, so here's what I do. I'm going to ask for a proper noun. Okay, proper noun, a person name, a place name. Okay, so proper noun 1 is, I think, a good name for the variable, and we're assigning it. We're using input. Please enter a proper noun, space. Okay. Couple of points here. One, the space. Okay, we don't want where the user types the response to be crowded up on this semicolon. And the way to hold it off by one space, which is a good user interaction practice, is by ending the prompt string with a space after the colon. Okay. And then some people might see this input and say, well, don't we have to do a further conversion? You know, don't we need to eval it or something like that? Don't we need to surround this input with an eval? And my answer is no, because in this program, we're only processing character strings. So we don't need to do that. Okay? So the first thing we're going to ask for is a proper noun. Okay? And here I'm just going to ask for one more thing. Now I could go on. It's a lot of fun to make these go on for a while. But what I was trying to do was to type adjective 1 equals input, please enter an adjective, and note the space before the end of the string. Okay, so that's all of the it's all the input I'm going to get. Okay, so that's good. Let's so are we going to put any code under processing? Nope. The way I'm thinking of this right now, I have the input processed, I have the output processed. Really all the work's going to be done when we're creating the output. Okay, and so how could I put together a string? So here's the sentence I'm trying to create. Okay, I'm trying to create the sentence, what let's just say blank is a blank twit. Okay, so I'm going to fill in the blank. So the proper name is a adjective twit. Okay. Okay, so that's kind of a British expression, and that makes sense because Python is named after Monty Python, which is a British comedy act. Okay, so calling somebody a twit is very Pythonic. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to use these adjectives and the proper noun and the adjective, and add in these other words in a print statement that gets the job done. And if it's a pretty short sentence, we just need one print. Okay, and here's what mine looks like from my pre-baked version. Again, I'm going to try to not have you be watching me type if I can avoid it. Okay, so we say print proper noun 1, comma, is a, comma, adjective 1, comma, twit period. Okay, and that's it. And let's do the following. Let's give it a test. Okay, we have the input code. There is no processing code. We have the output code. How many blank lines do we have? We got too many blank lines. You can see the gray squiggly, so I'm going to get rid of one. And that gets rid of my gray squiggly. And now I'm going to run this. Right click, run Madlib machine. And if you look here, let's make this a little bigger by command scroll. Enter a proper noun. I'm going to say Kevin. Okay, and then I'm going to say an adjective, and let's just say gigantic. That's an adjective. Okay, and I'm going to press return, and then the output's a sentence: Kevin is a gigantic twit, which in the British sense of humor would be pretty funny. Okay, that's great. All right, now, what about an alternative approach? Now, one of the things that can happen if you really get into Mad Libs, you have longer sentences, and they're pretty funny. And sometimes you have like whole paragraphs, and they can get really, really funny. It's a story, okay? And you can use the Wikipedia link I'm showing up here as a way to find out about Mad Libs, okay? But what I want to do is I want to show an alternative way to do this, okay? And it's a way that's going to make more sense if you have a longer sentence. Notice that I got, in terms of the code I've already shown you, I got the spaces between the words automatically. Okay, so when we're giving a list of strings that we want to print, we'll always automatically, by virtue of having the name of the variable and a comma, get the text that's in the variable and then a space and then the next text, which is why at the end of is a, I didn't put a space, because I knew I was going to get one automatically. And then I got one after adjective 1. And that's also why I didn't put twit in its own entry. Like, for instance, if I had said twit, for instance, and then comma, and then a period, what you'll see now is if I test it, I'll get twit space period. So let's just test that. So I'm going to run that again and make it a little bigger, and I'm going to say Kevin gigantic, and it says Kevin is a gigantic twit space period. That's not how we write these things. So it's really nice to automatically get a space after each of the strings, but of course you have to be careful on the last one to make sure that you don't get a space before your period. And somebody might say, well, what if we wanted to have the period in its own string and still not get the space? Well, what we would do is we would have the last string that we're printing be an expression. And the way that you concatenate or glue strings together into one is using the plus operator. So you have string or variable name plus string or variable name. So we've got two literal strings here, and I'm just going to put a plus between them, and I'm going to get rid of that extra space there. And that's going to do what we want, because so now the last string that we're going to print is twit concatenated with the period with no intervening space. Okay, so let's test that. Let's give that a run. First of all, let's make sure we saved it by clicking on a different line, and we'll give that a run. And it comes back small again. I don't like that feature. So we're going to say Kevin is a massive, okay, and it says Kevin is a massive twit. No extra space. That's just perfect. So what you can do is have one print, and be careful about the way you get spaces between the words and the punctuation, but that works fine. Well, if you have a longer sentence, that's going to be harder to do. Okay, so I'm going to show you an alternative way to do it. So what am I going to do? Let me just put this in a comment for now. I'm going to toggle it into a comment. Okay, and I'm going to bring in this alternative code and show you that. Okay, and again, I'm trying to avoid you having to watch me type. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a print for each item that I want to print. Every string is going to get its own print. And how am I going to make sure that we don't get a new line, a line return, line feed, whatever you want to call it, after each of them? Well, we're going to use this end equals space. Okay, so that says the last character on the line that we are sending out to the printer is a space and not a new line return. Okay, so this is going to give us the space in between them. So we're going to get proper noun 1 space is a space, adjective 1 space, twit period. Okay, so let's and apparently we've lost our 2 lines between that code and main, and it doesn't like that. So alright, we've got this saved. Let's give it a run. So again, I'm going to take the brunt of the joke. Kevin is a, and let's say marvelous, be a little more complimentary to me. And it says Kevin is a marvelous twit. Now, why didn't we get that on separate lines? Well, we didn't get that on separate line because we use this end equals option. Now, so what's the default for end equal? Well, the default for end equal is a new line sequence. Okay, so if we didn't explicitly say end equal space, well, then we would have gotten everything on its own line, which is not what we wanted. Okay, now again, so that's the coding aspect of it. Now with the testing, again, it's really important to be able to forecast, to project, to anticipate what output you're going to get, because the testing that we're learning how to do now is testing by inspection. So the most effective way to do that is to predict what your output will be run the program, and then compare your prediction to the actual. Okay, so again, you have to be very careful about maybe situations where we have two spaces between the words instead of one. One space between twit and the period. Okay. Now, eventually, we're going to learn how to do some pretty fancy things with this kind of code. For instance, we could make checks on the capitalization. Okay. We could also check for things like maybe the user typed in an extra space either before or after the word that's going to mess up our spacing. At this point in our learning, though, we're going to assume that the user is going to properly capitalize the words, and they're not going to put extra spaces either before or after word that we have to either somehow detect and reject or trim away. We're going to learn how to trim them away eventually. So we're trusting the user a lot. That's something we do early on. We're trusting the user to give us proper input to make a sentence that looks good. But apart from that, it's pretty much okay. So that's it for the tutorial. Your assignment is more or less a corollary of this. That's pretty enjoyable as well. So good luck on that. And I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.